Everyone, herkes hoş geldi. A warm welcome to you all. I'll make my speech in English and Turkish bilingual to address everyone. Apologies first of all for running really late. Although it's Sunday, most people slept in a bit. So maybe next year we'll do the same event at lunchtime. Honourable Consul General of Republic of Turkey in Sydney, Dr. Şehitleri Anma Vice Consul General Cafer Aşık, Honourable Craig Lundy, Federal MP, Member for Reed, New South Wales, Honourable Barbara Perry, State MP, Member for Auburn. Barbara is representing the Leader of New South Wales Parliament Opposition Leader, Honourable John Robertson, State MP, CEO of New South Wales Community Relations Commissioner Hakan Harman, Dr. Harvey Broadbent from Macquarie University, representatives of Turkish associations, Turkish ethnic media, members and friends of Atatürk Cultural Centre. Welcome to you all. We are gathered here for the commemoration of all Turkish and Australian soldiers who served and died in Gallipoli in 1915, and all other wars, conflicts and peacekeeping operations. The spirit of Anzac, with its human qualities and courage, mateship and sacrifice, continues to have meaning and relevance to our sense of national identity in Australia and abroad in Turkey. As we know, Australians commemorate 25th of April 1915 as Anzac Day. It was the day of the landing at Gallipoli. More than 20,000 Australians and New Zealanders and some servicemen from other countries went ashore at the Gallipoli Peninsula. In Turkey, the battle, known after the port of Çanakkale, where the Royal Navy was repulsed in March 1915, became part of the heroic story of the nation's revered founder, Mustafa Kemal. Çanakkale geçilmez, Çanakkale is impossible, became a common phrase to express the nation's pride at stopping the massive assault. Official commemoration of military casualties and veterans in Turkey is held on the day the naval war has ended. It was the day it started, it ended on the same day, which falls on the 18th of March every year. Çanakkale Gallipoli War was won by those heroic Turkish soldiers shedding their blood, starvation and ultimate sacrifice against Allied invaders and their local traitors who claim genocide nowadays. We've seen a recent example of that with Australian War Memorial putting up a sculpture which Turkish community is very upset about, called Evacuation. It will be taken up both federally and state-wise, and we're very concerned about that. We'll be seeing you and our MPs personally about that issue, and it's already been raised with AWM already. Going back to our topic, today we respectfully commemorate the 99th anniversary of the Çanakkale Gallipoli War as a great national victory. The day Allied warships were repelled by the courage and sacrifice of Turkish gunners and foot soldiers at the Çanakkale Gallipoli fortifications. Battle lasted 2 years, claiming the lives of over 70,000 British, Australian, French, New Zealander and Indian troops on one side and over 60,000 Turkish soldiers on the other. The British invasion of Çanakkale Gallipoli at the westernmost point of the Ottoman Empire occurred at the same time as the Russian invasion at the eastern Anatolia. Between 1915 and 1922, over 3 million Turks were killed and displaced in concurrent Greek, French and Italian invasions of the western and southern Anatolia. Over 1.1 million Turkish were massacred and displayed in the Armenian revolts that facilitated the Russian invasion at the east part of Turkey. Under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Pasha, a young and brilliant army officer, then Çanakkale Gallipoli was considered the venue for the beginning of the Turkish independence war, which marked the awakening of the Turkish nation, changing the world's history forever. Çanakkale Gallipoli was more than a victory against foreign occupation. It provided the necessary confidence with the citizenry of Anatolia to commence the Turkish War of Independence, which marked the end of the imperial dynasty and theocratic order of the 700-year-old Ottoman Empire, Ottoman era, and led to a creation of a Turkish Republic in 1923 with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's leadership, based on secular democracy, plural society, gender equality, and equal human rights for everyone. Today, we honor our eternal leader, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the martyrs and veterans who fought the Turkey's independence so valiantly and so selflessly. Australian Atatürk Cultural Center welcomes you all in attendance at this official ceremony and community embracement picnic day. I'm going to continue my speech quickly in Turkish. Türk Bağımsızlık Savaşı'nın ilk dönüm noktası olarak tarihe yazılan Çanakkale Zaferi'nin 99. yıl dönümünü kutlarken Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'nin kurucusu Yüce Önder Başkomutan Mustafa Kemal Atatürk ve silah arkadaşlarını bağımsızlık için canlarını feda eden şehitlerimizi ve gazilerimizi saygıyla anıyoruz. Büyük yokluklar, insanüstü çabalar içinde doğan muhteşem Türkiye Cumhuriyetimizi çok seviyoruz. Çanakkale Deniz Zaferi'nin 99. yıl dönümünde Başkomutanımız Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, şanlı Türk ordumuzun şehitlerini anma törenine hoş geldiniz. 18 Mart 1915'te Nusret Mayın gemisinin döktüğü mayınlar ile Türk topçusunun ateşi sonunda İngiliz ve Fransız donanmasının 7 gemisi batmıştır. Çanakkale Boğazı'nı zorlayarak geçmeye başlayan düşman donanması ağır kayıplar vererek geri çekilmek zorunda kaldılar. Çanakkale Deniz Zaferi'nin ardından 25 Nisan 1915'te başlayan Kara Savaşı'nda Türk ordusunun başarıya ulaşmasını sağlayan en önemli unsur Yüce Önderimiz Başkomutan Mustafa Kemal Atatürk'tür. Kurtuluş Savaşımızın ilk kıvılcımı Çanakkale'de atılmıştır. Egemenliğimizi bize veren, bağımsızlığımızı kazandıran, demokratik, laik ve sosyal hukuk devleti Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'nin kurucusu Başkomutan Mustafa Kemal Atatürk ve değerli silah arkadaşlarının öncülüğünde İstiklal Savaşı şehitlerimizin kanıyla sulanmış, Anadolu'nun kutsal topraklarında çalışkan, özverili ve yüksek karakterli milletimizin şerefini koruduğu al yıldızlı bayrağımızın altında terör saldırılarında vatanımız uğruna canlarını kaybeden Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri şehitlerimizin ve vatandaşlarımızın manevi huzurunda sizleri bir dakikalık saygı duruşuna Avustralya ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti milli maçları için ayağa kalkmaya rica ediyorum. May I please ask you all to stand up to pay our respects to those who have fallen. Starting with the Oday, the last post for Anzacs and Mehmetçik, 1 minute silence, national anthems of Turkey and Australia.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Thank you all. Yıllar olsun. I know that we're very late. We had a late start and some of us have to leave soon. We're going to be very quick with our speeches. First, I'd like to ask our president of Atatürk Cultural Center's President Pazar to have a quick speech in Turkish to address Pazar.
Sayın Başkonsolosum, değerli misafirler, sevgili yurttaşlar ve çocuklar. Bugün burada Türkiye'nin varoluş noktası olan 18 Mart'ı kutlayacağız. Sağ olun, teşekkür ederim. Türkler tarihi boyunca dünyaya örnek olmuşlardır. Asla esareti kabul etmemişlerdir. Devamlı özgürlük mücadelesi vermişlerdir. Vatan kutsaldır, asla bölünemez. İşte bu inançla tüm dünyaya meydan okuyarak Çanakkale Savaşı'nda Çanakkale geçilmez demiştir. Türk tarihinde çok önemli bir yere sahip olan Çanakkale Zaferi 1915 yılında İngiltere, Fransa ve onların getirdikleri sömürge askerleriyle Türk milleti arasında gerçekleşmiş kanlı bir savaştır. Düşman bir hedefi vardı. O da boğazları geçerek İstanbul'u ele geçirmek ve Osmanlı Devleti'ni saf dışı etmekti. Denizden ve karadan yapılan savaşlar 18 Mart 1915'te başladı. Düşman donanması bütün gücüyle yüklenmesine rağmen Deniz Savaşı'nda başarısız oldular. Düşmanlar Deniz Savaşı'nı başlattığı gün çok büyük kayıplar vererek deniz hareketinden vazgeçmek zorunda kaldılar. Bu yüzden Türkiye'de Çanakkale Şehitleri Anma töreni 18 Mart günü yapılır. 5 hafta sonra denizden geçemeyen düşman kuvvetleri karadan geçme yolunu denediler. 25 Nisan 1915'te kara savaşları başladı. Avustralya kara savaşlarının başladığı 25 Nisan gününü Anzac Day olarak kutlar. Çanakkale'yi geçemeyeceklerini anlayan düşman ordusu kışın geri çekilmek zorunda kaldı. Çanakkale savaşlarında 250 binin üzerinde Türk askeri şehit oldu. Düşman ordusunun da kayıpları çok fazlaydı. Araştırmalara göre 1 metrekareye 6.000 mermi düştü. Çanakkale Savaşı'nın kahramanı, Anapartalar Grup Komutanı Gazi Mustafa Kemal ve Türk ordusunun bu başarısı Türk milletine Kurtuluş Savaşı'nda cesaret vermiştir. Aziz milletimizin evlatları her dönemde seve seve vatanı için ölmesini bilmişlerdir. Sömürgeciler ise sömürgelerindeki zavallıları hep ölüme terk etmişlerdir. Çanakkale Zaferi'nin 99. yıl dönümü kutlanırken Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'nin kurucusu Yüce Önder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk ve silah arkadaşlarını bağımsızlık için canlarını feda eden şehitlerimizi, gazilerimizi saygıyla anıyoruz. Türk ve Anzac şehitlerinin ruhları şad olsun. Teşekkürler.
I would like to ask Consul General of Sydney, Dr. Şehitleri Anma Programı, to address us.
Honorable guests, distinguished members of the Australian Turkish community, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to say that it's a great pleasure to see you all here. I'm so happy that we are together on this very important day for our country and also for Australia. Today, we are together here to commemorate the Turkish Martyrs' Day and the 99th anniversary of the Çanakkale Naval Battles ceremony. We are here to remember with deep gratitude Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, his fellow soldiers, and all the heroes of the Turkish nation who sacrificed their lives for their nation throughout the history. Çanakkale Battle is considered as a defining moment in the history of the Turkish people. It laid the grounds for the Turkish War of Independence and the foundation of the Republic of Turkey. One of the most important culminations of the Çanakkale Battle for us was that it brought Atatürk to the stage of history. Turkish nation made history on March 18, 1950. Thanks to this victory day that our heroes of all ages who sacrificed their lives for the sake of our national and spiritual values made others confess that Çanakkale is impossible. The whole world witnessed a resurrection of our nation. The Çanakkale Battle, in which thousands of young people who didn't know each other at all made struggle by coming to Çanakkale from the four corners of the world, helped establish permanent and strong friendships between different nations. Çanakkale, where these people from diverse nations are lying side by side, is also a unique example that reminds humanity of the value and meaning of peace in the face of the bitter and brutal truth of war. Çanakkale, which used to be the battlefield between our nations, has become a sacred city for Australians and New Zealanders as well. Thousands of people from Australia and New Zealand gather every year in Çanakkale. They honor their ancestors and the sacrifices made for their countries in a time of great turmoil. We are delighted to host them in Çanakkale every year on Anzac Day. In 1934, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk wrote the famous words that reach out to the mothers who send their sons from faraway countries. Those words underlines eternal friendship by stating that there is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side. I hereby would like to reiterate on this special that day, Turkish nation has always cherished its martyrs and war veterans. It has never forgotten and will never forget them. Before I conclude, I would like to pay my respect to all Turkish martyrs who sacrificed their lives for their nation all around the world. Ruhları şad olsun.
I'd like to ask Mr. Craig Nandi, the member for Reed, to address.
Thank you very much. Consul General, Deputy Consul General, Mayor, Commissioners Raker, Barbara, Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting me today. And today I wanted to focus probably a little bit more on what has happened since that day. Because what happened on the field of battle, while we originally got to know each other at the opposite ends of guns, it has really turned into a wonderful relationship. And I want to pay particular respect, and your association bears the name, and the Consul General made reference to Atatürk, because not only was he far superior to us on the field of battle, not only did he defend his homeland as it was entrusted to do, he then at the end of the Ottoman Empire took control of a fledgling republic. And he was a very, very wise man. They say in politics, often politicians lack vision. This could never be levelled at Atatürk. Because in the early stages, I think around 1922-23, he realised that the children of Turkey were its future. They would be the foundation upon that the Republic would be built upon. And he started with Children's Day. And it is a day that I think is just so clever. However, I don't think he envisaged what he was ultimately doing. Because whilst he saw that as a foundation of building the Republic of Turkey, what I don't think he foresaw, and what I'm sure he would be up now in paradise looking down upon, is how far that would go. What started as a concept in Turkey what started as a friendship built at the other ends of the field of battle. Today, the children running around this gathering are the foundation of the next generation of Australia. Something started in Turkey some 90 years ago, 10 years past, or 7 years past a battlefield, has borne its fruit, if you like, in the next generation of Australians who will be our leaders. Your Turkish community in Auburn is an amazing success story of multiculturalism. We live in an amazing country. You make it better for being here, and your children and grandchildren are our leaders of tomorrow. Thank you for inviting me to be with you. Please say hello to me afterwards. I'm your Federal Member of Parliament, only ever a phone call away if I can help. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Barbara Pitt, who is this?
Hello friends, it's wonderful to be here with you again. Firstly, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we come together to remember but celebrate our history together, and that is the Aboriginal people. And firstly, can I just welcome all of you here, and particularly our new Consul General from Turkey, Dr. Shadia. Welcome. I think that you will come to love Auburn and this Western Sydney area in particular, because it is the home of Australian Turkish people. It is the place where the Australian Turkish community are raising their families, but not only doing that, Shadia, they're making an incredible contribution to not only our home here together, but to this whole country. Over 40 years of migration of the Turkish community, a wonderful community, well respected by all levels of government for over 40 years. So thank you, Shadia, for being here today. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge today Harkin. Harkin is the Chief Executive Officer of the Community Relations Commission. And Harkin, you know, I know that everyone here is very proud of you. One of their own, being the head of that commission, is a commission that's not just about Turkish people, as you know, but a commission that's about us as Australians. So, Harkin, to have you there is a fantastic thing. Congratulations. And of course, Professor Ozdemir and the Australian Atatürk Cultural Centre. That's very important. Australian Atatürk Cultural Centre. You know why that's important, Furza? To have an organisation with that name, not only because it has Atatürk's name, but because what it stands for. Because your organisation and everyone that's here today, Omar, everyone that's here today, is about two things. It's about understanding your history and remembering your history, working to promote your culture, which is what we want as Australians. I think it's important, if you don't know what your culture is, what your history is, then that doesn't make you a whole person. It makes you half a person. Because to know the past is to know the present and the future. It's to know where you've come from and where you're going. And I look at the national anthem, and I love coming to this event because Omar has up on the Turkish national anthem, he has the words in English. And the last line of your beautiful national anthem says this. It talks about freedom. And if anything that Atatürk taught the whole world was about democracy and freedom. And we cannot take freedom and we cannot take democracy, whether it be here in Australia or anywhere else in the world, for granted. we have to work at that. We have to work together. We have to work here, and we have to work wherever else democracy exists. And yes, we're lucky that we have this incredible thing called freedom in this country. But this morning, as we gather here, there are many countries in the world where that freedom does not exist or is being eroded. And I say always, no matter where we've come from, the best thing that we can do for our homeland is this, is that we can be the best citizens in this country and the greatest role models to make this country as great as it is, the greatest role models for other countries. So my friends, your partnership in that is very important. The teaching of your children as you have them here today about your history and what Atatürk stood for and what the Battle of Çanakkale stood for is very important. The teaching of your children of your culture, your language, makes you better Australians. So thank you for always welcoming me. I know that sometimes you may not always agree, but let me tell you, my heart is with you always. And Shadia, you will get to know how wonderful this community is. It is making our lives here in Auburn just not the best, but it makes our country the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We could not have this event here today without the help of Auburn Council. Our Mayor, Mr. Chair, please, his help has been giving us our rooms for our meetings, our gatherings. Without Auburn Council's help, we would really struggle. We're really helpful, we're really thankful, grateful for you and for your help, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Omar, and the Australian Atatürk Cultural Centre, and I thank everybody for being here, and I thank you for the invitation. I acknowledge Barbara, the State Member, Arkin, the CEO of Community Relations, and of course Craig, my friend, the Federal Member for Rui, my new friend, Shayla Hanabayarja, Doctor, and I thank you. She visited me a couple of days ago, and I can tell you she's got the Turkish community at heart. She wants to do a lot of work for you guys, and she must be applauded here today. And of course, Vice Consul and Professor Baldwin, and every single one of you here today. I know we are here marking a very important occasion. Basically, on the 15th of March, 18th of March 1915, Çanakkale, the end of the naval battle that took place and started the Gallipoli. And we are here today acknowledging the fallen, the sacrifices made by our seniors, by our forebearers. And how wonderful it actually fits in with what we've been celebrating the whole week, our Seniors Week. Seniors Week is about acknowledging and thanking and honouring all the work that our seniors have been doing in this community. So I want to take this opportunity and thank you for all the work and the sacrifices that you have made to your community and to the wider community of Sydney. Auburn City Council is actually serious about acknowledging the work and the legacy of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. We have actually formed a committee working with the Turkish sub-branch, working together to make sure that we commemorate the centenary next year in Auburn. We formed a committee formed by some of the members of the sub-branch, myself and Councillor Batik as well, of Australian Turkish Heritage, one of our council colleagues, and working together to make sure that event takes place at the Railway Park in Auburn, having a memorial for Mustafa Kemal and the wonderful words that was recited earlier by the Consul General, because we believe in the work and the legacy that he has done, and it's been talked about the forging and the kids being the future generation. So the past has been discussed, and Auburn City Council is working on the present and acknowledging the past at the same time. So once again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for having me here, and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to now invite Community Relations Commission CEO Hakan Harman to address.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge Your Excellency, our Consul General here in Sydney, and Vice Consul, the Honourable Craig Laundy, the Honourable Barbara Perry, President, and ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests. Look, it's a huge honour and a privilege for me to be invited today, so thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered. As I found out earlier, the Darug and the Eora nations. This is very important in Australian history, because when British colonials settled here in 1788, there were 46 nations of Indigenous people within New South Wales alone. So they were multicultural before we arrived. The first settlers were multicultural, and since then there have been representatives or immigrants coming to Australia from almost every single nation on our planet. It's a huge honour and a privilege for me, because I'm here to be standing in front of a poster of this great man, an absolutely transformational leader for all people in the world. And then for me, having been born in Turkey, in Istanbul, and since 1977 to have the privilege to grow up in such a beautiful country like Australia. And it is very much about citizenship, and I'll say a few more words about that. The Turkish-Australian history actually predates the Federation of Australia, 1900. There were citizens from the Ottoman Empire, some 300 of them, I believe, but mainly from different backgrounds, Greek, Armenian, and Cypriot Greeks as well. And the Cypriot Turkish population were the first to actually come to Australia under the White Australia policy. They were the first Muslims to be invited to come to Australia. And then in 1967, the bilateral relations between Turkey and Australia were brought together, which enabled Turkish residents to migrate to Australia. My parents decided to come out in 77, but in terms of, recently we had Professor Andrew Marcus, who does the social cohesion report of how migrants have settled into Australia, come and present to our commission. And he actually noted, and I've quoted this recently, that the Turkish population in Australia are one community that has settled so well and accepted Australian way of life. And he actually attributed that to our secular democratic model of our republic in Turkey. And I think that's quite significant. And there's a lot of bond that was formed, I believe, in terms of nearly 100 years ago, that 8-month campaign. I'll leave it to the professors to decide how many died on each side. I don't think it matters. I think some 500,000 people either lost their lives, whether it was from the Allies or from the Ottoman Turkish side. 500,000 people were impacted, lost their lives. That's just significant. It's the atrocity of war, and we always say, lest we forget. And I think that as it's celebrated in Turkey, I think there's a real common bond between the three nations, Turkey, Australia and New Zealand. And I think in Turkey, we view Çanakkale as the defining moment that produced the movement for the Republic of Turkey. And Australia and New Zealand celebrate it as the creation of a spirit, and that bond of friendship, empathy a caring for, a diverse society. And I think these are the things that mateship and that fair go that makes Australia such a beautiful nation. And I think that's why Turks really have an affinity with that notion as well, because it's embedded into our genetic background as well, I believe. Finally, I think for 100 years on, I'd like to bring back what people mentioned about the Community Relations Commission. I am here on behalf of the Community Relations Commission for a multicultural New South Wales, where we are there to promote cultural harmony and social cohesion in a multicultural New South Wales. And I say, in that fold, we are going to unite. And on the 10th of April, we're going to have the penultimate event of Multicultural March. I know it's funny, we're having it in April. 10th of April, I think people should put it in their diaries or look out for it. The Premier's Harmony Dinner, where over 1,000 community representatives will come together to celebrate the success of multiculturalism in New South Wales. And as I put it, the most successful multicultural state on the planet. And it's because of events like this, it's because of the Commission, it's because of the commitment this country makes systemically to inclusion and the opportunity for every individual to participate in our polity. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I would like to, the last word should not be with me, and it should be with our biggest Atatürk. And I said, we always say, lest we forget, and I think how fragile we all are as humanity. But Atatürk did say, mankind is a single body, and each nation is a part of that body. And I think that's represented the most beautifully in Australia. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We've temporarily lost power. It's just back up now. No, that's okay. You're in luck now, Harvey. I'd like to introduce you to Professor Harvey Broadbent from Macquarie University. He's the Director of the Gallipoli Centenary Research Project, Department of Modern History, Politics and International Relations. Harvey Broadbent will show how the strait was protected by various means and how effective these defences were on 18th of March 1915 to produce the Turkish victory. The talk will be illustrated with maps and images. Harvey Broadbent will be showing documents he found in Turkish archives. Harvey Broadbent is the author of 2 books of Gallipoli, Gallipoli the Fatal Shore in 2005, The Boys Who Came Home, Recollections of Gallipoli in 2000. He produced 4 documentary films on the subject of ABC television, using the expertise in Turkish history as a senior research fellow at Macquarie University. He spent 6 years researching the campaign in Turkish archives and will publish his next book, Gallipoli, the Turkish Defence in 2015 at the Centenary. Professor Harvey.
Thank you. Teşekkür ederim Ömer Bey. Merhaba. Sayın Konsul, hanımefendi Şehide Hanım, Sayın Bahri Hanım, Sayın Başkan, Sayın Hakan Bey, Sayın Craig Bey, sizlere sayın bayanlar, sayın baylar, sizin 18 Mart için geldiniz, konuşma, hoş geldiniz diyorum. Benim için bugün çok büyük bir nefis gün oluyor. Sizlere konuşmak başlıyorum. Ama Türkçe'de değil. Ama şimdi İngilizce'de devam edeceğim. Tamam. What I just said, for those of you who don't understand Turkish, ladies and gentlemen, is that I'm now going to continue in English, because I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson, a history lesson this afternoon, but not an intense one. We heard about the importance of the 18th of March, on 8 Mart. And that's what I'm going to talk about, is why is it important? Today, a few days after 18 Mart, we're here to commemorate this Turkish victory. This was the victory which led to the whole Gallipoli campaign. And without that Gallipoli campaign, we would not have Anzac Day, I believe. Because it was on the 25th of April 1915 that Britain and Australia and New Zealand and France invaded Turkish land. And they failed to get past this famous place called Çanakkale. So how did this happen? Well, I'm going to talk to you about this as the Turkish defense of the Çanakkale Strait. For 6 years I've been researching in the Turkish military archives in Ankara the military documents about Çanakkale and Gelibolu. And now I need someone to be able to change the slides. Thank you. Next one. So how did it begin? What led to the 18th of March 1915? Well, we have to go back to 1914. At the end of October 1914, two Turkish warships, the Yavuz and the Midilli, sailed across the Black Sea to, of all places, which we know a lot about today, unfortunately, Crimea. These ships were sent by Enver Pasha, and his idea was to attack the Russian ports on the Crimean Peninsula, because he was afraid, and the Ottoman government were afraid, that Russia would invade the Ottoman Empire from the north. And it was important to disable the Russian fleet. As a result of this attack, and here you see what the Midilli did, it bombarded the Russian Navy, but it didn't cause too much damage. It wasn't a major event, but it was enough for the Russian government to send an ultimatum to the Ottoman government in Istanbul that if you do not withdraw your forces from the Black Sea, if you do not send your German advisors away, then there will be a war between us. And that's what happened. A few days later, on the 31st of October 1914, the Ottoman Empire declared war on Russia. As a result, Britain and France, Russia's allies, declared war on the Ottoman Empire. As a result of that, the Ottoman Empire joined forces with Germany and Austro-Hungary Empire, and the First World War broadened and widened dramatically. On that day, change the slide please. On that day, the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed V, he declared war on behalf of the Ottoman Empire, on the Allies. And at the same time, as the Caliph of Islam, he issued a fatwa. This fatwa read in part, that is the original fatwa. That's how it looked. Part of it said this: when the enemy attacks Islam and attempts to invade and raid the country of Islam and capture the people of Islam, if the Sultan of Islam orders mobilization for a war, wouldn't it be an obligation for all the Muslims, young and old, to be ready to fight as infantry and cavalry with all their assets and lives pursuant to the verse of the Quran which says, set off light and heavy and fight on the path of God with your assets and lives, if you only knew that this is more beneficial for you. Question. The answer, it would be, God knows better. Written by Hani bin Avni el-Urgubi, who was the chief cleric of Islam in Istanbul. Not many people know that there was a double declaration of war. A declaration by the Ottoman Empire under the Sultan, and the declaration of a jihad under the Caliphate. So Turkish soldiers were fighting for their homeland, but also fighting for their religion as well. And we mustn't forget this in these times when religion is such a controversial thing. Change, please. So, what happened after that declaration of war? This is November 1914. This is the Gallipoli Peninsula. Here is the Çanakkale Boğazı, or the Çanakkale Strait. In September 1914, the Ottoman defences looked like this. There were some minefields here, and there were some forts along. Old forts from the time, some of them from the time of Mehmed the Conqueror. And this was not considered to be enough to defend, because Winston Churchill, on the 3rd of November, sent a fleet, a squadron of ships, and attacked these forts here at the mouth of the Dardanelles, or the Çanakkale Strait. That warned the Ottoman government that the intention of Britain and France was to attack Turkey through, or the Ottoman Empire, through the Çanakkale Strait. And therefore they needed to strengthen these defences. This is a shot of the type of guns which were on the forts at the side of the Çanakkale Strait. There were many of these heavy guns. But bear in mind, the important thing about the defence was not the guns, but the minefields. We'll come back to that again shortly. How did the Turkish ships get through the minefield? If you put mines in the sea, how do you know, can you be sure that your own ships aren't going to be damaged? So there was a secret route the ships had to follow. Here it is here. All the Ottoman ships knew this route, to have to take this route through the minefield. With this close-up, you can see more of these forts at the side. This is the Şimenlik fort in Çanakkale, and Hamidiye, Tavur, Mehcidiye. They all had names associated with the Ottoman sultans. All the way down the sides. And further down, they also had smaller guns as well. This is the result of that attack which Churchill ordered on Sedlbahir at the mouth of the Çanakkale Strait in November 1914. You see the damage to the fort. So it was important to build up those defences. The man in charge of those defences was this man, Cevat Pasha, who was the commander of the Straits forts. His job was to improve those defences. And he, can we go back please one? He had to share command of the defences with two German commanders. So this is important when you're looking at Çanakkale. The Ottoman commanders had to share command with Germans, and this was often a problem of conflict of opinions and ideas. And we don't have time to go into those today, but just rest assured that it was a constant problem. They had to consistently find compromises. These are the two gentlemen commanders. On the right-hand side, Admiral Guido von Eusden, who was called the commander of the Dardanelles Strait, and Cevat Pasha was called commander of the Strait's ports, or castles. And here's number 2, Vice Admiral Merton. So Cevat Pasha was having to deal with 2 German commanders, not just one. So between them, they improved the Dardanelles Straits. Here you see, if you remember that previous map, how much more defensive installations there are now. You can see they have added, before there were 5 mine lines, 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now they're extended to 11 lines of mines by the 18th of March, 1915. So I brought you forward now to the 18th of March 1915, and this is how it looked on that day, the defences. What you see are all these minefields, including one down here. Look at that one. That's important, very, very important, in Erinköy Bay. The area is now called Karanlık Liman, in Erinköy Bay. There are additional things to look at. Apart from the mines, they have added these areas here, where the triangles are, in which they placed mobile guns. These are called howitzers. I'll show you a picture of one in a moment. But these were added down the side, and their job was to fire on the British and French minesweepers who were trying to clear the mines here. And they succeeded very well. The British and the French tried to send their minesweepers through the strait throughout January and February 1915, and failed to get past because these guns, these smaller guns, stopped the minesweepers. The big guns stopped big ships. Let's take a closer look. Here is it's not very clear because it's so light, the picture, but if it was darker you could make out the gun here. And this is a shot of just the officers and one single soldier in charge of this gun position. Notice they're covered by bushes, by trees, so they were hidden from the enemy. They couldn't see them. And when they fired these guns, they would drag the horses in and drag the guns away from that position and find a new position. So the ships couldn't get a fix on where they were firing from. And that was very important. And they even made some fires in the bushes to make the enemy think that there were guns in those positions where the fires were, the smoke. These were all aimed to try to fool the enemy navy. So here's a map showing these defences a bit clearer for you. Here are the minefields here, and here's this very important one, number 11, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and the castles and the forts alongside. Just so you know, Anzac Cove is up here. But Anzac Cove, we are still 1 month away from landing at Anzac Cove. This is March the 18th. You might just be able to see some pink areas here. There, there, and there. They are places where the Ottoman defenders dropped nets under the water to stop the submarines coming through. These are submarine nets. And in addition to the submarine nets, they had torpedo tubes at the narrowest point here. We call in English this point between Çanakkale and Kilitbahir, on the other side, the Narrows. En kısa, the narrowest, the shortest route between the two sides. This is a sketch from one of the documents of what the submarine nets look like under the water. And they were held down by heavy weights at the bottom and floats on the top surface. And originally, the wording on here is in the old Osmanlıca, Ottoman language. But that's what the nets will look like. The nets were not used to stop the submarines because they're only nets. The submarines can sail through them quite easily. So what were they used for? The important thing are these floaties on the top, these floaties. Because if the net's moving, the ships on the surface can see where the submarine is. And they can drop the depth charges on them. So these are very clever ideas to detect the submarines. This map shows you what we call the trajectories or the areas, the fields of fire for these howitzer guns I showed you the picture of. Those which were down here went towards from Kumkale across to Sedlbahir and Morto Bay. These ones here were able to fire in this direction, and these ones here in this direction. So they were placed to fire in certain directions to cover the whole of the area. Let's move on, please. Thank you. Okay, so why was this line of mines important? Well, because 1 week before the 18th of March, a little ship called the Nusret Gemisi was sent out from Çanakkale and sailed down the strait, pulling 20 or so mines, and laid these mines here in Erenköy Bay. At night, the enemy, the British and the French, did not see this ship do this. So on the 18th of March, when the British and the French started to attack, they did not know that there was this minefield in Erenköy Bay. The Nusret now is in Çanakkale, still. If you go to Çanakkale, you can see the Nusret ship by the harbour side, just outside the town where the Naval Museum is today. For many years, it was actually in, I think it was Tarsus. It was laid in Tarsus, and then they found it there, and they brought it last year or the year before to Çanakkale. Before that, there was a facsimile or a model, a life-size model of the Nusret. So Nusret laid this minefield there. Then on the 18th of March, the big day, early in the morning, around 9 or 10 a.m., a German aviator, a pilot, in a shaky old aeroplane, took off from Çanakkale Airport, or airfield, sorry, it wasn't a port, it was a field. And his name was Captain Serno, S-E-R-N-O. And he had with him a Turkish observer, a second lieutenant. And they sailed, they flew down past Çanakkale towards the entrance, towards Sedlbahir and Kumkale. And they saw a huge armada a huge fleet of ships, the British and the French naval squadron, sailing up towards Çanakkale. And they immediately flew back, landed at Çanakkale. There were horses waiting for them at the airfield, and they galloped into the town to the headquarters of Cevat Pasha. And they reported the fleet, the enemy fleet approaching. Of course, the other observations also showed this. And by 11 o'clock, the British fleet and the French fleet, known as the Allied fleet, sailed past Sedilbahir and Kumkali. This is a picture of what happened next. It's very confusing, but this picture actually, this painting is in the Istanbul Naval Museum. It's a big mural. If you get a chance to see it, it's really worth seeing. It's very well done. The Istanbul Deniz Müzesi. During the battle, as the ships approached the entrance to the Dardanelles Strait, or the Çanakkale Strait, the forts opened up their firing. This is a famous picture of the Turkish hero, Corporal Şehit, carrying these heavy shells to the guns. The documents tell us that these shells were 250 pounds in weight. Now, I can't convert that into 100 kilos, 100 kilograms, which are huge weight to carry. People say, you know, how could this man carry such a heavy weight? And the explanation is often given that because of the emergency situation and the battle starting to rage, firing on the ships, that the adrenaline in his body was enough to give him this extra strength. An adrenaline rush, yes. There is a photograph of this event where this painting, which is in the Atatürk'ü Mausoleum Museum in Ankara, is based on this photograph. Now, the photograph shows Şehit carrying this shell, but it is a posed photograph. If you ever see it, always bear in mind this was posed because for publicity purposes, for after the event, that this man was a hero, but the records show that he did actually carry a very heavy shell. And the shell in the photograph has been described as being made from wood, not from metal. So you have to bear that in mind when you see historical photographs. But the important thing is that the documents do show that he did in fact carry these heavy shells up by himself because his colleagues, his comrades had been wounded in the battle. Do you see the idea of somebody being wounded here and these men being wounded at the side of him? So Şehit becomes a Turkish hero on this day. And there's a statue to him just outside Kilitbahir. If you go there today, you can see it. Now, what happened? Here's the French and British fleets. This is a little complicated because it's not very light, but here it's a little bit too light to see the pictures. But at the front, this is around about just before midday. They passed Kumkali and Sedilbahir, and they're led by Queen Elizabeth's ship. These are all the names of the ships. The Inflexible, the Lord Nelson, the Agamemnon, the Queen Elizabeth, the Prince George. The Queen Elizabeth was the most modern battleship which was then in the war, in action. It was a huge dreadnought. It was fueled by oil, so it was very fast, and it had very, very big guns. And Churchill had sent the Queen Elizabeth ship to the Çanakkale Strait to give some power to the British attempt to pass by Çanakkale. What the fleet were trying to do was to send the minesweepers through to sweep these mines away, and then these ships would come through. Now, they had, in order to give the minesweepers the opportunity to go past these mines, they had to stop all these guns which you saw, the howitzer guns, which were positioned alongside, and these forts with their big guns had to be silenced. So they sent the minesweepers forward, but the minesweepers continued to be hit by the guns from these batteries on the side of the Çanakkale Strait. These British ships in the black opened fire on the forts in the distance. And they were so strong in their gunfire that when they were hitting Çanakkale, most of the town caught fire and was burning. So it was a very critical situation. These ships came through, their job, having bombarded the forts, which were silenced, because if you are being bombarded by big guns and you're in a fort, you don't stand there and say, hit me, hit me. You go and run away and hide underground in the dugouts. And that's what they did. So these guns were silenced. They couldn't fire on these ships. But these guns could. So these ships then, having spent their ammunition, the French ships were then coming through the line like this. These are the French ships, the Gaulois, the Charlemagne, the Bouvet, the Suffren. They came through and also bombarded these forts, but they couldn't silence the howitzer guns. When they had finished, their job was to turn around and go back, and these British ships would then come after them. And this is when the battle turned in favour of the Ottoman defenders. These French ships came through. The Bouvet turned like this, came down here, and remember the minefield was here. It hit a mine. In 2 minutes after the explosion, the Bouvet sank with 600 French sailors on it. They were lost immediately. They went down with the ship. Just after that, the British ship Irresistible was hit, a mine here, followed by the Ocean, and followed then by the Suffren. Altogether, 6 British and French ships were put out of action within an hour or two of the battle. We change the slide, please. Omer, the fifth. Here's a photograph of the Bouvet after being hit. She's listing onto her side, and then she's sinking. Within 3 minutes, the ship sinks, and the men are lost, 600. This turns the battle. Oh, can we go back, sorry? 6 ships altogether are lost. The British Admiral in charge, Admiral John de Robeck, declares there are too many ships lost. Hit the mines and also hit by those guns at the side of the shoreline. So he cancels, he stops the attack on the 18th of March, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Ottomans declare themselves to be the winners of this conflict. That, in a nutshell, is what happens on the 18th of March. This is the victory at Çanakkale. But it's not the end of the story. Because on Anzac Day, can we change the slide, please? Thank you. On Anzac Day, 25th of April, 1 month after, just over 1 month after 18th of March, the British decide they must send an army onto the Gallipoli Peninsula, Gelibolu Yarımadası, to knock out all those forts I showed you, all those guns on the side. They land the army in order to knock out all of those forts. And this is what the Gallipoli campaign is about. It's about knocking out the forts so the Navy can try again later. So that's why the Anzacs come from Egypt, join forces with the British forces and land over 65 to 70,000 troops on the 25th of April. While the Anzacs are landing at Auburn, Anzac Cove, this Australian submarine, known as the AE2, the first AE1 actually was destroyed in the Indian Ocean before Gallipoli. The AE2 managed to get through those minefields on the 25th of April. And it sailed through the nets and escaped, and it was operating in the Sea of Marmara for several days. And it sank a couple of Turkish ships until a little Turkish ship called the Sultan Hisar chased her one day, a gunboat, and managed to cause damage to her and brought her to the surface. Sultan Hisar looked like that. That's his Captain Riza. And Captain Riza and the Sultan Hisar chased the AE2 around the Sea of Marmara for a few days before forcing her to come to the surface. Again, a little difficult to see, but the AE2 came up from the surface. It was being damaged. Sultan Hisar took the surrender of the AE2, and they took the crew off the AE2, put them onto the Sultan Hisar as prisoners of war. Then the captain of the AE2, Captain Stoker, opened the hatch at the top here, pulled the engine operation into reverse, and the AE2 began to sink. He didn't forfeit the AE2 to Sultan Hisar. This would have been a prize of war. So he scuttled the ship. He scuttled it. He jumped into the water, swam across the Sultan Hisar, was taken a prisoner himself, and the AE2 sank to the bottom of the Sea of Marmara. It's still there today. And there is a big discussion about, should we bring this ship up for the 100th anniversary, for the centenary? But this is a problem between governments. The Turks want the ship AE2 to be in a museum on the side of the Çanakkale Strait, or in Istanbul. The Australians want to bring it back to Canberra, put in a war memorial, as I understand. So this is a debate which is going on. if they can't solve the problem, maybe they'll just leave it on the bottom of the sea. It's not a war grave. There are no dead bodies on that ship. All the men were taken off and became prisoners of war for the whole war. And most of them were sent to work on building the tunnels in the railway between Ankara and Adana at a place called Belemedik. This is where the AA2 went down, a place called Karaburun on the Sea of Marmara, just at the opening of the Pazar, the strait here, and the Sea of Marmara this side, going up to Istanbul. That's the result of the defense of the straits. The battle for between the submarines, the submarine warfare. 8 Ottoman battleships were sunk by Allied submarines throughout the Gallipoli campaign. 31 transportation ships were sunk in the Sea of Marmara and near Istanbul. And 200 various sailboats and pontoons were damaged. The British and the French lost 9 submarines altogether. 3 French, 1 Australian, as we heard. That should be British. 5 British, 3 French, and 1 Australian, and 1 submarine was captured by the French submarine was captured by the Ottomans and taken to Istanbul. Next one, thank you. So, that's the story of the 18th of March, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I hope it gives you a little bit of the story of why the 18th of March is important. Because the 18th of March, the failure of the British Navy and the French Navy to get past Gallipoli to Çanakkale Deniz, they didn't succeed in doing that, and that's why the Gallipoli campaign happened. So without the 18th of March, as I said before, there would be no Anzac Day. And, of course, throughout 1915, from 25th of April, Anzac Day, right through to the evacuation in December 1915 from Anzac, and then from Sedlbahir in January 1916 by the British. No time during that period was the British Navy ever again to attempt to travel past Çanakkale. They never had the opportunity again. So this was the big victory which actually probably saved Turkey, saved the Ottoman Empire in the First World War. Of course, it didn't stop the final defeat on the side of Germany in 1918. But it has, to this day, we are able to say that no enemy of the Ottoman Empire or the Turkish Republic, Türk Cumhuriyeti, no enemy has ever yet been able to pass Çanakkale. So we can say, even today, Çanakkale geçilmez.
Thank you, Professor Harvey. Thank you very much. One of the things we'd like to do later this year is promote young Australian Turks to learn Turkish history, Australian history, the importance of Anzacs. So probably through Professor Harvey and great people like him to teach young Australians, Turkish Australians, Anzacs, the Anzac spirit, the Turkish spirit, what happened in English, right? Come fix it up. I would like to thank all of our distinguished guests, Consul General, Vice Consul General, Auburn Mayor, Craig Lundy, Barbara Perry, Hakan Harman. Thank you all very much. there was a key that was lost. If you found the key, please come and see me. Two other things before we have lunch. There's a petition happening. Bir imza kampanyası var. New South Wales Parliament's bill that passed through last year, 8th of May. New South Wales Parlamentosu'nda Ermeni, Asuri, Yunan soykırımlarını, sözde soykırımları geçiren kanun tasarısının onaylanmasını protesto edeceğiz yine bu sene 10 Mayıs'ta. Onun için bir imza kampanyası var. İmzalanmış olanlar lütfen imzalasınlar. Genç arkadaşlarımız, Adnan, diğer arkadaşlar, herkeste imza kağıtları var. Lütfen, please sign. Please go to the counter there. And also our Australian Atatürk Cultural Centre's membership forms are here, both in Turkish and English. I would like all young people to sign up and help us out, be part of us, grow with us. Please. Thank you all very much. Lunch is being served. Help yourselves. And then now some music from the music group from the Cultural Centre. Thank you.